everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. Today we are doing a film discussion on the movie Selma. Selma is a film that came out in 2014, and it is about the campaign of Dr. Martin Luther King as he tries to get voting rights. And it talks about the epic march from Selma to Alabama and all the things that transpired during that time. I am here today with my lovely colleagues, but first I'd like to introduce myself. My name is Elizabeth Ajunwa, and I am a librarian at the Glen Arden branch for the Prince George's County Memorial Library System. So thank you again for joining us. And I would love to have my lovely colleagues here with me to introduce themselves so we can get into our discussion.
Well, I'm Daniel, and I work at the Spalding's Library. Kiana, you're muted.
My apologies. I am Kiana Turpin. I also work at the Spalding's branch.
Thank you so much, guys. So happy we get to talk about this movie today. We are talking about this in celebration of Dr. Martin Luther King's life and his holiday. So let's start with the first question we have. What was the strongest emotion that you felt when watching the film? And I guess I could start. I saw this movie in theaters when it came out years ago. And then I watched it again in preparation for our discussion. And I definitely felt stronger feelings. I think it felt more relevant this time around watching it. It just was extremely poignant this time around. So those were like the strong feelings that I felt. It felt relevant.
Yeah, like you, I saw it in theaters, of course, and it was impactful for me just because it was like, okay, I'm going to go see a Martin Luther King movie on screen. It's like one of the major MLK films that came out during my lifetime, I guess. But watching it again in preparation for the film discussion in the context of all the civil unrest that we've been having, in the context of the election that we've just gone through, it's like, wow, this is hitting a little harder. It feels a little heavier. So I think that was like my strongest feeling about it. It just like, it brought up some deeper emotions for me this time around.
And so this is actually my second time seeing it. The first time I didn't get to go to the movie to see it, unfortunately, but I did see it when it came out, and I didn't really internalize it the first time as I did the second time. I think I paid a little bit more attention to the details and things. And Elizabeth, you're correct. It's relevant for what's going on today in society. I guess I want to say that I'm appreciative that that someone was able to, I guess, I'm appreciative of the fact that we have people who were able to do things that I think that I don't know that I would be able to do them now. So I guess appreciative, and yeah, that's it.
Yeah, I think that's so real because I was watching it and I think you feel like everyone says, oh yeah, I would have been marching with Dr. King and stuff like that. But then you see people being beaten and fighting and just doing like the day-to-day things to try to vote. And I'm like, would I really be willing to sacrifice in this way? Would I really be willing to do all of this? And would I really be willing to be seen as a troublemaker? I don't know. Like, because it's easy to kind of put yourself as the hero in your story, but the way this movie was made, it makes it feel very real, and it makes you kind of question, like, would you be willing to
do this and risk your life?
Right.
To do this. And I don't think in today's society I would. I don't even think I probably know anybody who would be willing to do those things.
Yeah, because even we've seen the different groups marching in today's time, and like the marches that we're having today were not the same marches that they were having back then, where it's like the police brutality was outright. It was in your face. It was like, yeah, we're going to do it, and we're not going to care. You're going to get the water hose. You're going to get the billy club. You're going to get shot. You're going to get like all those things. And the movie, I feel like, depicts that how it was like widely accepted as normal. Whereas today, if something like that were to happen, it would be considered like deplorable, or it's like, oh my gosh, I can't believe that the cops. It's an all out war. Like, you know, like it was they were battling it out back then. It's like it's different now.
That's a lot of courage that I don't have. Like, even now when we do things like that, I make it my business not to go out there because I am afraid of what's going to happen. So
it's almost like some type of post-traumatic stress where it's just like, okay, these are the things that have happened in the past. They could possibly happen today if I were to take part in that. So I think that kind of speaks to whether somebody in today's society would be able to withstand the things that they have, that a lot of our historical figures have.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree with both of you. I think this is a good question and segue from that question. Describe a moment or a scene in the film that you found particularly moving and why.
Can I have two?
Mm-hmm.
Because I have two scenes that kind of impacted me a whole lot. The first scene was probably, or clip rather, was first the where you saw like the mom and I don't remember what their name was. I think his name was Jimmy Lee. Um, they had ran into the diner, and then the police just barged in and started beating the old man with the billy club. I think later in the movie we found out that he's like in his 80s. Like they started beating him with the club, and then they get Jimmy up against the wall and they just outright shoot him right there in front of the diner. And it's like the exact opposite of equal force. Like they were sitting at the table, they yanked him up from the table, they push him up against the wall, they shoot him, he dies right there in the diner. They're beating the older man senseless, and I think the mom was just sitting there, the mom or the wife, I'm not sure which role she was playing, but she's just crying hysterically. It's just a really impactful and emotionally stirring scene. I was actually kind of disturbed watching again for the second time because, of course, I start thinking about all the civil unrest and the police shootings that we've had in this time. So yeah, and the second scene that was really impactful for me was it was towards the end of the movie where they were. I guess it was during the epilogue. I think her name was Viola Liuzzo.
mm-hmm.
They showed up what ended up happening to her after the march, and they said she was killed right after the march just because she was in support. She was trying to drive some of her fellow marchers home, and she was killed. I think I want to say by a Klansman, but don't
Yeah, she was
quote
killed
me on
by
it.
Klansmen, according
Yeah, just for being in support. And I was like, wow. But so yeah, those are my two most impactful scenes.
I had quite a few. The first one was in the beginning when you see the four little girls bombed, years before the march from Selma to Montgomery even occurred. Like, I think I was thinking, like, wow, like this is what this movie is about to be like. She started the film off with a huge shocker. Mm-hmm. Another scene I really liked was the scene where Mahalia Jackson sings to MLK, and we hear Lettucey singing to him, and of course she has a beautiful voice, and it gives you like a sense of like hope, like you're thinking, wow, he can just pick up the phone and call Mahalia Jackson. Like,
right.
How cool is that? Like, and I'm so silly when I looked at the movie And he's like, I want to hear God's voice. I'm like, she about to read a scripture? And forgetting that he's a reverend himself, but yeah, like she's saying to him. Another scene was, of course, the first time the SCLC and Hosea Williams go to the Pettus Bridge the first time, and James Reeb later that night was beaten by the segregationists when they're coming out of the diner, and they kill him. They beat him and they kill him. That really, it was really hurtful just to know, like you said, the same with the lady, what was her name? Daniel?
Viola.
Yes,
Yeah.
they killed her for the same purpose that they killed James Reeb, because he was in support of everything that was going on. It just makes you think, like, they have no limits on who they hate, and they're willing to kill anyone. And lastly, of course, at the end, when Dr. King, is doing the speech, How Long, Not Long, it gave feelings of liberation. You really feel like the power behind his words, like, we shall overcome. And it just makes you think, like, what am I doing or contributing to society to carry on his legacy? Yeah. So those things were, I guess, most important to me.
For me, the two scenes that I felt were most touching, and the scene, I thought maybe it might not get me this time because I already saw the film, but the first time I saw the film, when Jimmy Lee dies, and his grandfather is at the coroner's office, and Dr. King goes to visit him, and sorry, I'm getting like emotional thinking about it, because you see throughout the film that Jimmy is like the one who takes care of his grandfather, and it's just like he'd lost the person who, you know, takes care of him, and they'd both been fighting. This is like this multi-generational family fighting for just the right to vote, and it just touches me still so much, just thinking about it, and thinking of just what a loss that is to see your future generation, someone you felt was going to probably live on and carry on and see what maybe the promised land would look like, and it just is taken away. It just impacts me so much, and I cried the first time I saw it in the theater. I cried again watching it last night, and as you can see, I'm even kind of tearing up again thinking about it. So that was extremely impactful to me. And similar to you, Kiana, the last scene, I can't quote the words that Dr. King is saying, but it, for me, felt like he's talking about now, like the words of the hypocrisy of society, and the considerations of people in different class structures, and how they're kept down, and why that lets people believe and uphold racism because of their feelings of superiority, or wanting to hold on to superiority because frankly they might feel like they're subjugated in other ways. And I just felt that that was just so on the money to now. And just like watching it, I'm like, wow. And also I think something, they're not scenes in the movie that I found touching per se. I mean, of course the Bloody Sunday scene is like, seeing it dramatized is just as impactful as seeing the actual footage. But thinking of John Lewis, and I always felt the portrayal of John Lewis was so well done in this film.
Yeah.
You know, he's recently passed away, and the Voting Rights Act was basically gutted, unfortunately, and just like seeing like how, I guess people have kind of forgotten history a little bit, like how much people fought for this. Um, and so I was just thinking of like, I guess going back to what we said in the beginning, people really sacrificed for
Yeah.
people to be able to do the basic things of suffrage, to vote. Um, and I all was extremely touching and meaningful to me watching the film again.
Mm.
Woo, okay. The next question I have here was, um, what did you like best about the film and why? Mhm.
Okay, so I kind of have like a jokey. It's a jokey one. My first one is a little jokey. I have another. It's on a more serious note. What I like the best about this film is just one particular clip. Of course, it features Oprah. I feel like every time she plays these roles, she's hitting somebody. Like she did the same thing in The Color Purple, where she was like, laying people out. And once again, we see her again reprising that role of laying someone out, and she's taken down to the ground yet again. And I feel like, okay, Oprah's always doing her thing. But on a more serious note, I think what I like best about the film is actually the cinematography and like the production of it. We know that Ava DuVernay is the actor for this movie. I'm not the actor, the director, I'm sorry. The director for this movie. And I think she has a really good way of dramatizing historical events in a way that not necessarily try to over exaggerate. And she doesn't use a whole lot of hyperbole in her work, but I think she uses just enough to kind of convey the real struggles of the time period. And she she does a good job of driving home the points um, of how much of a struggle it really was. And I think she does a really good job of playing on her audience's emotions as well, but not in a very, okay, let's just incite anger and riot. And it's more like to just bring the awareness of how real it was for the time that was going on, how much of a struggle these people actually had to fight through. I think that was one of my favorite things about the film. It's just like the totality of the work was just so impactful in a very, I'm even going to venture this. It was historically accurate, but she just used enough creative license to make it worse.
The cinematographer of this movie is Bradford Young, and he actually went to Howard University. His cinematography is beautiful, as seen in this film, but he's done a lot of other films, and he's lived in the DC area. I don't know if he still does, but lived in the DC area for a long time and went to Howard. So that's, like shows a connection to this area.
Yeah.
But I agree with you. The cinematography.
Yeah.
Lovely.
I agree too. What do you like best about the film? Ava DuVernay's directing. Of course, we already know that she's known for her notable work. She's in a sense like what Hollywood needs now, I guess. She's very different in her delivery, and yeah, she's very vivid in depicting what's going on or what went on. So yeah, her directing.
Actually, I don't think it's a stretch to say she is very good at depicting what is going on, because I also feel like the way she directs things, I feel like, I guess this goes back to like the whole production staff period, as far as the writers and the directing and the cinematography. But the way the movie was created, I feel like it was created to be timeless. Like you can apply it to events that are going on now, like we said earlier. But it also brings to light the fact that what was going on then is real, and like it definitely shows the contrast between where we were and where we are. and then where we still are trying to get to as well. So I don't think it's a stretch to say she does a good job or they do a good job of depicting events as they are. They're just as they are in different points in time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I would agree with both of you. I think Ava knocked it out of the park with this film. I think a lot of people felt that it should have got more, awards and stuff.
Oh my God, yes.
We can talk about why that didn't happen, but
the soundtrack alone.
Yeah, the soundtrack got an Oscar. The song "Warrior."
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I thought it should have got a little bit more than that.
So I guess I could say that's what I didn't like about the film.
You get more recognition, maybe.
Yeah, like really, really good film. I don't even know what other films were up against it during that time, but yeah, like best movie, best actor, like give these people the credit they deserve, you know? But,
so if I could deviate from our script a little bit.
Yeah, sure.
I have a question. I have a question for you guys. Do you think that if this movie came out now, it would receive the accolades that it deserves?
It would have been Best Picture.
Okay.
No doubt about it. So one of the questions I have for you guys, and we can talk about this, is what you think about like creative license taken in the film.
Mm-hmm.
And the film was actually, the reporting, the allegedly, a lot of the Oscar voters weren't feeling this film. And one of the reasons why was because a lot of people questioned the way that LBJ, Lyndon B. Johnson, was represented in the film. They felt that he was not portrayed as like someone who very much supported the Voting Rights Act and very much was a fighter for the Voting Rights Act. And so a lot of people were like, I don't like that, I don't. And then in general, they just like weren't into watching a historical film and they weren't interested in this, but they kind of felt they didn't like that historical license was taken with the film. And they felt like a lot of the portrayals, especially of like Lyndon B. Johnson. I just remember that was like a huge question.
I don't even remember that.
And it's funny because there's another movie I think HBO did called All the Way about Lyndon B. Johnson. And the portrayal to me is very similar. He was very much a politician. He very much cared about getting Congress to have the votes, to have, for things to pass. And so the issue with the Voting Rights Act was that he didn't have the support in Congress. And that was like his main struggle. And I feel like the movie portrays that very well and why he was like asking King to wait, or, Dr. King to wait a lot. And I feel like the other movie, All the Way, does that as well. So I just thought it was very interesting like reason. And I know that was like listed a lot as the reason like people felt like, oh, it's not historically accurate enough. So we're just like not gonna vote for it.
Yeah.
I'm curious what you guys think about that.
Because this is my thing too. I feel like you have to also be aware of whenever you're reading a book or watching a movie or even watching a TV show, you have to be aware of the role of the characters. And we're watching a story that is told from the perspective of Dr. King. So creative license as far as president, I mean, it's not his movie. It's about the fight for the voting rights and Dr. King and the struggle for Black people just to have the right to vote. It's not necessarily about what Congress was doing while Lyndon B. Johnson was trying to be president. And I feel like, yes, you do have to make nods toward all the moving parts that are involved. And I think Selma did a great job of doing that. However, you have to realize that Selma is focused on the struggle of Black people just for the right to vote. And it's like, okay, well, while Lyndon B. Johnson doesn't have support in Congress or whatever the story or the narrative is allegedly, then that's okay, but we see that people are out here dying and fighting and getting beat and getting hosed down and getting blown up and being pretty much tortured on a daily basis just for wanting the right to vote. Yet again, we see Oprah Winfrey just trying to, was it Oprah Winfrey who was, because I always get Oprah Winfrey and this.
Who goes to the voting office and they're like, name all 87 judges. And
Exactly.
like, what?
Oh,
Yeah, because in this movie, I get her and Lorraine Toussaint confused a lot.
Yeah. They do look alike in this movie.
In this movie, they look very similar. But yeah, I was like, this is what's going on while Congress is doing whatever they're doing. So I'm like, that's why I feel like the creative license, I feel like, is justified here because it's not a movie about politics. It's about the struggle and the unnecessary fight that people had to go through.
Right.
And I say unnecessary because it's like you're preventing people from voting for what purpose? I mean, it's like just because you hate this group of people.
Yeah, exactly. The next question I have is kind of switching the questions around, but what did you think of the portrayal of Dr. King in this film? And can you think of other representations that you thought were better or ones that you thought were like not good or, just other ones? I can say that I was trying to find other portrayals of Dr. King and there's not a lot of them. I would venture to say this is one of the like major films about him. There is a mini,
which is actually quite surprising. But
yeah, like there's not really a lot that you can find there's a movie called Boycott where Jeffrey Wright played Dr. King. Carmen Jojo, yeah, I think that's how you say her name. She played Coretta in this movie and played Coretta in in Boycott. So she's played Coretta twice now. And yeah, it's just hard to find anything. I've seen parts of this miniseries from the 1978, I think. That, actor named Paul Winfield played Dr. King. Definitely very 70s if you watch it. And Cicely Tyson actually played Coretta Scott King.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so, but it was a miniseries. It wasn't a film. There's other like kind of TV movies you see here and there all the way. Anthony Mackey, he played in, the Avengers. He was Falcon in the Avengers. Avengers, he played Dr. King. But for me, I feel like this is like the portrayal of MLK.
Yeah.
He, I guess, kind of looked the part. He's definitely like took on the kind of speech pattern. He wasn't doing like a complete imitation of his voice, but definitely took on that essence. The actor's Daniel Oyelowo. So I don't know about you guys, but I thought he did a really great job.
I thought he was phenomenal. So I totally agree.
Yeah.
Like I said, this is like the first major Dr. King film that I can remember seeing in my lifetime. So like for me, this is the film. And I know his life and his work has spanned so much more than just Selma to Montgomery, of course. But it's like, I felt like it was a really good snapshot of, his work.
Yeah. I've read somewhere or watched in an interview that because they couldn't use any clips from Dr. King's actual life. Steven Spielberg has the rights to it because he was going to make a film. And he actually asked David Oyelowo if he would play MLK again because he felt like he did such a good job. And I feel like if another director is like, hey, can you hop on this one and do this again? But he said no because it took so much of him to do that film that he just he could do that again. He just felt like he couldn't do it again. That's what he said in the interview. couple
Because
years.
I mean, and that would be that's kind of understandable because like I said before, like this is just a snapshot. Can you
Mhm.
imagine trying to like get yourself in character for like the entire
Life.
like the entire life? It's like
Yeah.
how much do you have to go through? How much you have to put yourself through just to put yourself in that mind frame? I mean, especially now dealing with everything that we're dealing with currently, it's like I feel like it would be even 10 times heavier just to try and do that today.
I agree.
When I read the question, I felt so bad because I'm like, oh my God, what other films have I seen that depicts his life? And I really couldn't think of any because there aren't any.
You know what
And
came to mind for me?
oh,
Our friend Martin. That's like what came to mind, and that's like
Yeah.
yeah, yeah,
and I'm like,
Mm-hmm.
this is like probably outside of that miniseries, which many people probably haven't seen because it was a TV miniseries. Um,
Yeah.
uh, like I'm like, this is probably the most comprehensive,
yeah.
thing I've
Like
seen.
you've
It
seen,
shows him when he's a kid, and then it shows him like at different parts of his life. Uh, and I'm just like, yeah, I think that's like the most. And
Yeah.
it's great that there's something out there that kids could watch, but I feel like we should have more than that.
yeah,
Definitely on someone who has like a statue and a day and a holiday,
right.
Mm-hmm. A whole
Just
a whole
monument.
recordings
a
of
whole
stuff.
monument. Like
And that's another time. That's another discussion for another time. But the fact that we just got this monument, and what has it been? 5 years? How long has
Oh
it been?
yeah, most definitely. I would even say
it's it's pretty brand new.
yeah, it is.
it's definitely
It's
newer. Yeah,
mm-hmm.
I don't know.
compared. Yes.
Yeah,
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 Yeah.
compared to the ones that have been around for like
years,
way longer,
much longer.
many years, much longer. Like they're historical monuments because they're old at this point.
Yeah, yeah. Um, so okay, I think we've all agreed that this is a good representation, but
Yeah,
I wanted
absolutely.
to add in a discussion about a current controversy. And this one was kind of I would say at the beginning of this controversy when it really started getting going. And the question is, what do you think about the current controversy regarding Black British actors playing Black American historical figures? Um, because David Oyelowo is British or
Yeah.
from the UK. Don't know exactly where.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think he was definitely on the first realm of like that. I think around that time, I don't know if it was before or after, I can't remember, but 12 Years a Slave had come out, and
Mm.
LG for also British played Saint Solomon Northup in 12 Years a Slave. So that was like still like no one's really talking about it then, but now it's like a thing. So I wanted to
I
pose the question
think.
to you, see what your thoughts are on it.
Personally speaking, I don't necessarily have an issue with it in in these particular cases because we know that slavery was in the UK. I mean, slavery was
Yeah.
a global industry. Um, and I feel like they have a connection or at least the ability to connect to the situations at large because I feel like Dr. King's speeches and his impact went so far beyond America as well.
Mm.
Um, yeah, I don't find issue with it. If you can get yourself into character and if you do the role justice, then power to you.
Yeah.
Um, I understand why some people would be hesitant to say, Um, I think we should have Black Americans play American historical figures. But I mean, if you can act the role and play the role and really get the message across, I don't necessarily find too much of an issue with it. I find more of an issue when I think for me it comes down to creative license. if you're taking too much of a liberty in your role, and it's like, okay, now you're just taking away from, you clearly aren't able to get into the experience, and there's like a disconnect between the acting and the viewer, then I think that's when it's an issue. But for me in this film, it didn't come across at all for me. Like I felt the connection to it.
I don't have a problem with the individual being British at all. He David
The yellow.
Oyelowo, I
Yeah.
apologize.
No.
He did a great job depicting Dr. King. You couldn't, I guess, he had his speech down, and yeah, I mean, like his voice, like he did a really good job with that, even down to his physique, you know.
Mm-hmm.
So he was the perfect person for this role in terms of him being British, as Daniel said. Like, if you are able to do the job, then hey, why not? I think I have more of an issue when, like, I think that a few years ago, you were hearing on the radio how you have white individuals portraying Black people. That was an issue back when I think Leonardo DiCaprio was to play someone. So I think I have more of an issue, like if they were, I guess, white and trying to depict a Black character. That's more of a problem for me than them, I guess, being British.
Yeah. Because it's like, and I hear a lot about the controversy too when it comes to animations a lot too, where you hear a lot of the cartoon characters that are presented as Black, but they're voiced by white or other actors.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just like, okay, but if what you needed was a voice, then why not, I mean, I think that's where I have more of an issue. That's when for me it goes beyond just the ability. It's like it's almost like and I don't want to get in trouble for saying something like this, but it's almost like a professional form of blackface. Where it's like you are a white voice actor and your job is to play a Black character. I think that's where I start having the issue.
Yeah, and it's interesting because I think for me, how I see this is it's interesting because I'll say my parents, I'm Nigerian, so I have like a disconnect, like, well, I don't feel disconnected because I'm a Black person and I've grown up in America and I've lived as a Black person in America. So I feel like once you've lived in a society that has dealt with racism, that's your understanding. But I always kind of pause when I hear this question because I'm like, oh well, like, oh well, my family's history is not exactly this. But I think my perspective on this is where this controversy stems from is what we were talking about earlier. This is one of the first films about MLK, and this person has had such an impact all of this time, and this is one of the only one we can think about except for like TV movies and that type of thing. Whereas, how many movies are there about Abraham Lincoln? How many movies are there about different presidents and different historical figures? There's you can just interchange people. And what I think I hope to see is just more representations and more opportunities for people to represent these figures who meant so much. Because I remember one of the actors from the UK was talking about, there's not that much opportunity in the UK. And there's only so many, period dramas we can be in. There's only so many people who are casting Black people in, those like Victorian era dramas. Yeah. And that's like a big part of the UK film industry. But that being said, I think where I have an issue is when the actor who is portraying the character has not put any thought into what they're going to say to the public, and has not put any thought into like, this was a meaningful person to people. Like, you can't, like, I felt like David Oyelowo really understood the role he was coming into. And I felt like both like him and some other people in the beginning, they understood that this was serious. This is not a game. Like, you're playing someone important. But I felt like later with some, like, the more controversies have kind of increased because people have just been honestly very careless with the words that they're saying. Like, they're saying, you know, we don't have the same baggage, or, you know, saying stuff like that. And it's just like, that's not, like, don't say that. Like, don't open your mouth and say that. Like, this is someone who meant something. This is someone who mattered. And you need to come knowing that, like, it's a privilege to be able to play this person. And
that's the difference between, go ahead.
No, go.
I was just going to say, I feel like it's the difference between playing the role for role's sake and then playing the role while also understanding the impact and the historical context and everything that comes behind the role as well. Like, just don't take on the role because you think it's going to be a pivotal role for your career. Because you can kind of, and I can almost kind of tell those actors who, like, okay, I'm doing this for the role because this is going to put me here in my career, versus I'm going to take this role because I can really do it justice because I'm really connected to the story behind it. And that's, so I totally agree with you. Like, that's where, and that's kind of what I was saying, like, that disconnect comes in. It's like, because then when in real life, you open your mouth to speak about the role you've played, there's like no connection to anything that you did. But like, for him to tell Steven Spielberg no because the role he played was too heavy, that speaks to how connected and how seriously he took the role. It's like, I don't think I could do this again and actually span Dr. King's life.
Right. And I feel like there's been examples of people who've been really good about understanding the role they're going into. I think there's a movie coming up about Fred Hampton, about the Black Panther Party and just what happened with him. And the actor Daniel Kaluuya, who played in Get Out, is playing him. It looks like it's going to be really good. But
I'm excited for it.
His family, Fred Hampton's family, was like, we are fine with him playing this role. Like, if their family's saying it, you know, I'm not gonna argue. But it makes me think of, and this is like kind of like, I guess, adjacent to what we're talking about. Like, I think people need to understand, like, think of who has had the opportunity to be represented, who you're representing, and then just understanding that, especially with these historical characters, people are going to just have a lot of feelings. There's two.
These are people's lives. These are people's families.
Yeah, they're real
like,
people,
this is real history here.
And I think it happens with white characters too, characters outside of this. I mean,
definitely,
Brown is really popular, and, you know, people feel very strongly about Princess Diana. Selena, that just had a show on Netflix, and people feel very strongly. They felt strongly about this character, the person who's playing her now, and who played J-Lo, who played her in the past, Jennifer Lopez. And recently, and I feel like this is related, and kind of sums up what we're saying, is someone realizing the impact of the role that they're playing. Zoe Saldana played Nina Simone, and that was a huge controversy. Everyone was like, you should not play this role.
Right.
And yes, anyway. And then recently she actually apologized for playing the role. And you realize that, you know, there's a context, there's probably a reason I shouldn't have done this. And I think these controversies happen because sometimes people aren't being as thoughtful. So
because I think, and not to deviate too much, but just to kind of pick it back off your point, I think, and it's kind of sad to say, but I feel like colorism has just become a very recent discussion. And I feel like that contributed a lot to that particular controversy.
Right.
I mean, because
I think so too. I think because there's been so many actors who haven't had opportunities in the United States who are fantastic and amazing and just as well trained. And then it kind of felt like there's this, like, if not colorism, a kind of elitism kind of feeling, you know, because they're not American, it's better. But I think for that actor who's stepping into that role, they need to understand those dynamics and be respectful of those dynamics and knock it out of the park, because, you know, you know, these roles have not been seen on film until now. And my hope is that we see more and more. Like, I would love to see someone else take on MLK, or Dr. King. I would love someone else to take on Malcolm X, who was actually featured in this film. And I'm like, oh, I'd like to see them to do that. So, you know, we need more people. And I think this film was a good example of why we need more of these representations.
Definitely.
So the last questions I'm going to leave you with is, would you recommend this film or this movie? And if so, what kind of person would you recommend this film to?
Excuse me.
I'm going to say yes, only because, like we've said throughout this discussion, it is one of the pivotal Dr. King films. It's one of the pivotal Black struggle films that I feel is out there. As far as the type of person I would recommend it to, I would recommend it to people who really just don't understand how we got where we are today. Like, they think that people are acting, I'm trying to pick the right word.
Like
acting
it just came from thin air.
Right, exactly.
There's no racism.
Exactly. I'm just trying to make sure it's just like, I don't know. It didn't come from anywhere.
It didn't come from nowhere. You know, there's a history. There's a systematic history of oppression and subjugation. So yeah. What about you, Kiana? What do you think?
Yes, I obviously would recommend the movie to anyone who is obviously a fan of Ava DuVernay, anyone who is interested in watching a movie on the Voting Rights Act of 1965, excuse me, because now I know a lot of this is really sad, but a lot of people come into the library and they're like, do you have the movie on it? So to get out of reading something. So yeah, I would recommend it. I really enjoyed the film. Yes, simply put, I would.
Yeah, you know, there's a scene we didn't talk about, and I want to mention it.
Okay.
And I meant to mention it when we were talking about the portrayals of Dr. King, and I thought this movie was tastefully represented that he was a human being and he was not perfect.
Oh, I know what you're going to say.
I think many people know that he had many affairs, and that was actually portrayed in this movie, and I thought it was actually well done, because I've seen it in other films and I thought it was kind of tacky. So I think a film, that's what a film can do. A film can make you see what a person, like a flesh and blood person, looks like outside of like the historical reading context. And hopefully, because I suggest this film as well, and I think it was even more meaningful to me watching it again, is that it can inspire you to do research and look this stuff up and see, like, oh, what did actually happen? What did that happen? Did that happen? Who was that person? And learn more and learn how to apply this to your life. You know, it's not something that you need to just take as word, but it can probably inspire you and encourage you to.
And they say a lot of people do that after they see films. As soon as they're like, oh, I gotta look that up right quick.
Like, did that happen?
Like, even if you don't agree with it, it's like, well, let me go look it up and see what really happened. It's like, he wasn't like that. It was like, oh, he really was. So like, but I think it's also really important to show that, because like you said, he is a human being. He does make mistakes. He's not this perfect entity who is like the pinnacle of morality.
He's not like the civil rights version of Santa Claus or something.
Right.
He's often, he's a human being who is murdered.
And I think it speaks to you just have to have the ability to be able to separate the person's impactful work from their personal life.
Yeah.
Like, yes, he may have had many affairs, but that doesn't mean that there isn't work to be done.
Mm.
It's like, oh, Daniel's over there eating in the corner because he's hungry, but that doesn't stop the fact that his work still needs to get done, and that work still gets done.
Right.
I mean,
Also, I
yeah,
feel like this movie really showed that it wasn't just him. There was a whole list of people um,
Who helped
shown in this movie, not shown in this movie, who are part of this movement and made it happen. He was
Yeah.
a leader in many ways. But there were other people, other moving parts. This was organizations organizing to make, to sacrifice for the freedoms we are still fighting for today, and able to easily uphold today. So,
yeah.
yeah, I were you gonna say something else, Kiana, on this?
No, I'm just thinking about, like, I don't know why the scene of Bloody Sunday, is that correct?
Mm-hmm.
Why that keeps flashing in my mind as we're doing the discussion. And I don't want to go back because I know we're not talking about like what scenes affected you, but I just keep thinking about one of the law enforcement officers is riding on the horse and he takes the whip out and he just lashes it on someone. And it's like, who had the more difficult time? Is it our ancestors who endured slavery for so long, or is it the people who have struggled during the civil rights movement? And it really hurts. I don't really have any words for it, but it just really makes you emotional.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And
I think it comes down to something my mom always says. It's like, yeah, the struggles are different, but
yeah,
the intensity is the same.
yeah,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, like you still have law enforcement killing us,
Yeah, even today.
even today, and getting away with it. Yeah, that's another discussion, but
I
it
think
is. But I was thinking
Yeah.
about it last night, and I just keep thinking about it today. It's like, this is really still an ongoing issue. And we may never see it in our lifetime where we are going to be okay. And, those things will be in the past and we'll really live like a life where we don't have to face those struggles any longer. But it's just something to, be discussed.
I mean, I feel a lot of what you're feeling. Like the movie, I was almost crying earlier because just thinking of how much people have struggled and how much people continue to struggle. And again, this movie, I would absolutely suggest it. Um, I and it was it's a good movie, and I think it shows how relevant this the history still is. Like, where what do they say? If you don't know your history, you're destined to repeat it. So
Yeah.
um, I want to thank both of you so much for joining me for this film discussion on Selma. I hope everyone who's viewing this enjoyed this discussion. Um, I don't think so. We have Canopy, and there are films like Selma available on Canopy. I'm not sure if it's available.
Especially documentaries, yeah.
Yeah, but there are many films and really, really great documentaries on the life of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. And you have access to that free with your library card account information. So I hope that you take the time to check out this film if you have the ability to do that, but as well look up other resources and information about Dr. Martin Luther King in celebration of the holiday. So again, I want to thank you both. Thank you all for tuning in and watching this film discussion. I hope it was inspiring to you and inspire you to do research and just live an anti-racist life and fight against racism and all different forms of oppression in the ways that you can in your daily lives. So thank you all again, and hopefully we'll see you for our future virtual events. Bye, everyone.